All right, welcome to the latest episode of Canna Say Something. I'm really excited to be talking to these two guys here. The first two recordings of the show, probably not the first two episodes you'll see, but they were talking more about regulations and policy and a little bit more heavy-handed shit. So today we're switching it up in a real exciting way. I'm going to be talking to Dan Abramson and Matt Klinman. They are the co-creators, co-directors, co-founders, co-conspirators, co-everything that is behind the new Audible series Bloodweed that dropped on 420. The cannabis world has often gotten, comedy that is, kind of pretty flat, kind of the running the Cheech and Chong narrative down into the ground. Bloodweed, I think, has definitely, kind of broken from that mold and got a lot more on an industry level. We're going to be diving into that and a whole lot more with these two guys. But this is probably the smoothest introduction I've done so far. So before I fumble over my words, I'm going to kick it over to Dan and Matt. Introduce us to the audience who don't know you guys. What, besides Bloodweed, what else are you known for?
Matt, do you want to go? Or you want me to?
You got it. You got it.
I'll do it. I mean, that was a great.
I prepped him really well.
You really nailed it.
I'm gonna fuck up the rest of this interview because of that, but thank you.
So I'm Dan, and I co-wrote, and co-directed this with Matt. I'm a writer, producer. I spent many years at Funny or Die. I was editor-in-chief of Funny or Die for a little while. Then kind of got really into doing these audio series. Did one for Spotify that Matt worked on called Last Degree of Kevin Bacon. We did this Audible show, which we actually finished this a very long time ago. And excited that it's finally seen the light of day. And then I did a stint at Netflix where I was a director of editorial for their comedy brand, Netflix is a Joke. And now we're getting back into this.
Awesome. Yeah,
cool. Very long time. We finished this 2 years ago. It was supposed to come out last year, but then the Russian war happened and everybody felt right when it was supposed to come out. And I think everyone felt like it would feel like we were commenting on the invasion of Ukraine with a comedy weed show, and so everybody kind of felt like maybe we just chill for a beat.
Probably a good idea. Yeah. Sucks you had to hold off on your project, but that actually is probably a good reading of the room.
Yeah, you just it was had just happened, and I don't know. It was a very tragic situation that we.
Yeah. When we got the call, I don't think either of us were upset. It was just kind of that makes sense.
Yeah, no, we are the lowly, the least casualty of the invasion of Ukraine, a completely fine one.
You really would have been a great test of no news is bad news if you did go forward with that project. So, yeah. So besides becoming a Russian war provocateur, who else are you, Matt?
I'm Matt Klinman. I'm a writer like Dan. I also act and direct sometimes. I was with Dan at Funny or Die for a long time. I was also started up at The Onion. I wrote for the Onion News Network. I was ultimately the head writer for Onion Video for a while. I worked on their YouTube show too. Shows, Sex House, Porkin' Across America, if anybody's seen those. Did some Adult Swim infomercials. And then, have worked in television and audio stuff. Worked on that Kevin Bacon show with Dan. I also made the show called Smarter with Team Coco that's coming out right now. Also, it was for Luminary. That one actually came out a few years ago, but it's out from behind the paywall right now. And then also, I'm the co-creator and star of a new show that's on HBO Max called High Science. Funny or Die's High Science. That's also a weed-based show, a very different show. Much more, it's like a science show. It's a legit, learn about science show. It's sort of like Bill and Ted meets Bill Nye. And it's basically we smoke the stuff that we want to learn and then hallucinate scientific experts and learn all about it. But that's a very different.
I love that.
I do want to call out how impressive it was that Matt had two very separate but substantial weed-related projects come out on 420 this year.
I know, yeah, man. It's impressive. I actually had High Science on my list of things I wanted to talk about. And actually, one of my early questions was going off of the projects in order. I was so Matt definitely had to be the driving force behind the inspiration for this. So, Dan told me right before we started recording that was actually not the case. You guys got to want to lead me on, besides the war angle to it, how did we come about?
Well, I just need to call out. There's a reason why Matt was the perfect collaborator on.
Perfect.
Like, you need to come to me for this one.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this came about where it was after we just finished working on Last Degree of Kevin Bacon that we were both kind of like in this mode of like, what's the next thing that we want to work on? And I had, before that, after leaving Funny or Die, I had a little bit of a gap where I was like, oh, I just need to find something to occupy my time. And I just started seeing what was out there. And it was this era of when these cannabis companies, I think, just had so much money to spend. And I reached out to one that I saw was looking for a copywriter. So I was like, I bet I can convince this company to bring me on. I'll do their copywriting, which was like writing the descriptions of the weed strains. But then convince them that with my background, that it'd be good for me to like head up like a content creation like initiative. So I was there for a while, like coming up with like projects that we can do and writing scripts. Nothing ever got greenlit because yes, they had a lot of money, but it was all chaos. And
Dude,
I think at the very least got a little like journal off the ground. But like once I saw that, it kind of was like, this was a fun thing that I was exposing myself to in this world. I was like, when the next project came along, I was ready to move on to that. But it was this kind of thing where I was like, when else in my life am I just going to work at one of these companies? So yeah, I was enthralled just from a, like, I can't believe what I'm just kind of getting access to and witnessing.
Yeah, man. I've been in this game for about 7 years now, doing a lot of copywriting, and it's, I mean, now the money isn't there, so it's a little like less of the free spending, but the chaos is still there. And like to hear it from someone else who saw that, it's just like, everything was getting greenlit. They wanted the most insane projects, off the wall stuff, and none of it would get more than like a week or two out the gate, or like nothing would ever hit the final stage.
Because
it would just
there
be,
was
like,
so much excitement. It was just like everybody was just so excited at the potential of this, which was also like, it actually made for a really fun work environment. And it was this crazy combination. This gets reflected in the show a little bit, where you had these CEOs that were just like operating on pure like adrenaline and excitement. And you did have legitimate business people there. They pulled in people from all different backgrounds. And then you had like, they would try to like cherry pick because they had the funds to like poach people. So you had, I worked alongside like super talented people and like great designers. And then you would also have this element where they would bring in people that weren't like official employees of the company, but to consult. You know, and they was like, we mentioned this with some of the characters, like they spent many years on Humboldt, like, and they'd seen some shit. So it was like this amazing combination of personalities that was like, I think I was always like, I would love to figure out a way to like have this inspire a story. But what ended up happening, Matt and I went out and we were chatting about it. And one of the things that was, always stuck out was there is this element of these companies have so much money and they're infringing on, the black market. They're taking over. So there was this fear that those C-level people were in danger. And there was heavy, not surprisingly, like super heavy security at the offices. Because there was always that feeling of like, what if the CEO got kidnapped? That was just like, there was never anything while I was there that gave the sense it was going to happen, but it was definitely like a topic of conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Matt and I were talking and it just became like a very clear, like, well, what if he did get kidnapped? What would that story be? And that was just kind of like from there, we just kind of, carry the momentum of those characters.
Yeah, it's awesome that you were saying, I definitely want to talk about, because there was obviously the hands-on experience was felt like pretty early and often in the show. And, I think, the connection to the illegal market is definitely there. I was recently on a trip and I was talking to a journalist who, was very, kind of grew up in the Humboldt area and was saying, it's like that security is real, man. People are getting taken out left and right in it. So, it's in cannabis, like we're legalizing, but it's still like very much, an industry that's operating in the unlicensed side. And there's some people that are not playing their cards right, and definitely that felt in a lot of the characters in Bloodweed, with Chase definitely biting the bullet really hard on that overall. Yeah, I like I said, I really liked the actual personal touches, because usually you kind of get the glancing stereotypes of the cannabis stoner in the stories, and I think there's room for that. A lot of cannabis consumers don't like it these days, but I think you guys really did a great job of weaving in the modern day cannabis, as well as the weed culture world, and all that sort of stuff. I think opening up at Hall of Flowers was such a great idea. Seeing those cannabis folks, what was that industry? So obviously, Dan, you brought the industry experience from your time in there. And Matt, going to assume longtime consumer, obviously knowing about the plant with your other projects. How was this kind of like an interweaving? Like, were you guys like filling in the gaps and kind of bringing it all together?
Yeah, I also had just done a bunch of research and work and I had some experience sort of in like the tech world and like the tech bubble world. And there was a lot of overlap between that community and also just like that ethos and like just kind of the like, we're all going to get rich, let's go, let's fucking, like you saw it again with like crypto, don't get left behind, you're not going to make it. Like that kind of feeling was very much at play in cannabis like at that time. And so I think that, and especially Hall of Flowers, like that's really, we wanted to capture that like green rush bubble feeling. Where just like everyone was coming in and anything could happen. And I think that the characters that are like in that world, sort of like scammy, like YouTube, like hustle culture, like all that sort of stuff. It was really funny that was coming into contact with weed stoner culture and also with like weed black market drug dealing culture. And so like that sort of fusion and melding of things was what was really interesting to us and what we wanted to populate the show with character-wise.
Yeah, and I think you got that. You really did get a good wide range of it. I mean, doing a lot of business reporting over the years, I can't say how many people like Chase I've run into. And, honestly, Cold Fusion, was, the brand rep for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, was pretty much a quintessential person, like kind of falling out on their industry, kind of seeing the weed spots, getting that money in there. Nowadays we talk about how, basically a brand thinks they need a celebrity endorser to get noticed. And now it's because they've done it. It's so saturated now that there's just like every single person seems to have a weed brand.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, for us, it was like like what if Ja Rule teamed up with like, just like a tech, like, some like low rung tech, like billionaire or millionaire or whatever. And sort of made the thing. And that's the premise.
Yeah. And the Nepo kid topping on that with Chase, I don't want to shit on everyone. Obviously there's some businesses that are doing well out there, but there really are about a dime a dozen that were coming in like Elevator, who is the company that Bloodweed talks about in the show. There really is so many, and there still are a good amount of them, even though the industry has gotten a lot less money. It's kind of like, when are we going to see the real companies rise to the top? I wonder if that'll ever be, in that case, like, are you guys like dealing much in, the legal world of the weed? Like, are you buying much of the dispensaries these days? Are you buying still from the plugs? Like what's your familiarity with it? And what's your like thoughts on, the current, like, the legalized weed world?
Dan, you want to take that one, or?
I think you're gonna have a more fully formed opinion on this. I mean, I'll give you where I'm at, but I'm still in the I actually learned a ton when I was at the company I was at, like what I took away from it, as far as just like how things work and just like all the things, like the buzzwords that we use in the show. They're all, there's like a 3 or 4 month span where all of a sudden I considered myself an expert on all of that. Yeah. But at the same time, when I go into a dispensary now, I'm like, do you have anything that'll help me sleep at night? And I'm like, I have no clue what I'm asking for, and I'm just totally deferring to the guy. I don't know. Matt probably has a little more.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's like, this is a total stereotype of someone in their late 30s, that what I'm about to say, especially moving to California, where it's just like the weed is too strong now. Like it really feels like the scientists.
Heard that a lot.
And this is what I've kind of heard, right? That scientists all came in, like super smart people were like, these are the like terpenes and these are the things that make THC, and then we can like jack up the THC as high as it can, and it just makes me paranoid so often. So I'm always the guy going into dispensary being like, what is your weed with the lowest THC level? And
that's the thing that would get me to smoke more. And I feel like I've seen them not in California, I've seen them advertising like Colorado, where it's like a really, like almost like it's meant to be like weed from the 90s. Where it's like that.
Yeah. You're starting to see like a light, like weed brand, basically, like Bud Light weed, essentially, but
Yeah,
not
it makes
shit
it, well,
quality
the
of
thing,
Bud
like
Light.
I used to when Dan and I worked together in New York, and I would like buy it through like, you know, like an anonymous chat app where you would like tell them where you were and shit. And I had a really good delivery service in New York that had branding and like had like came with different strains, and it was great. And like the highest, if they had something that was, I would be like, what's the highest THC stuff you had? And it would always be like 23%, 24%, and that was like crazy. It was usually like 18, 19%. And now when I ask for the lowest, it's always like 23% THC. And also they don't like know or care what the other things are next.
Yeah.
So, and it seems like in the labs, they just select for what gives you the high THC score, maybe what gives you something in like a CBD and CBDA, or I don't know. But it feels like, and so my wife's uncle is about to open up a dispensary in New Jersey, and he's been growing like his whole life. He's like an expert that I always talk to about this stuff, and he's always like, yeah, the lab grown stuff, like it's just all these nerds like optimizing for the wrong stuff. Like there's so much more to a plant than what your computers can like and fertilizer can like pump into those things. And he's like, no shade on greenhouses, but like, because whatever, it doesn't matter where you grow it, but you just got to let it grow how it wants to grow. So like that's so he's kind of, I think, probably his ideology is probably rubbed off on me too, like chatting with him about that kind of stuff.
No, I'm glad to hear that, you know, and I think that you've kind of touched on a lot of really important points, you know, is like a lot of like the emphasis on THC is really just like not really where it's at. There's so much more about the plant that, you know, is that, and, you know, it's kind of like, I tell people it's not exactly the same thing, but it's, you know, but if you bought booze by the potency or the ABV of it, you know, like you're just going to be drinking Everclear, like you're gonna have a really terrible time.
But, you know, there's a time and a place for drinking it.
Exactly. That's why it's not exactly like Everclear. Yeah, you know, like you're not trying to get entirely messed up off it all the time. Like some people are looking for that like that lower sort of buzz, that lower sort of effect, and you know, some people just really can't handle it for one reason or another. And you know, there's a lot more different consumers out there, but it does feel like a lot of, on both sides of the market, it really is like THC focused with a lot of
well, it would just make me paranoid. Like that's I don't mind getting like high off my fucking gourd, but I don't want to be paranoid.
There's also there when I was younger and would get too high, it was I smoked too much because it was an activity. Not like I took one hit and I was like that one hit was gonna do me in. Like the act of like I mean you guys would probably speak to this more than I could, but like it doesn't feel like there's as much of the act of smoking anymore. Like in this case where it's like super high THC, for me at least, you couldn't be able to.
People aren't like passing around a joint and bunch.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Like I'm going to take 2 hits and then I'm going to have to like, regulate myself and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, and you know, if you guys do you know about CBD and how CBD helps with that and offsets the high?
Sure, but most of the strains, but like, there's so few strains that are high CBD and high THC. At least I go to, which is crazy. I'm like, well, why not? That's the whole fucking thing.
I think we're going to be heading there. It's just the market is still very slow to listen, and you know now there is no money to it, so I think there's a lot more caution behind it. So they're not rolling the dice as much more on the business side. They're also just getting pummeled by the unlicensed market because it's just really hard to keep up with those guys.
Yeah. I mean, we did a lot of, in the show, we have a whole thing about like the black market dispensaries or where they have to dump their weed off of. And like, we did a bunch of research about like sort of how those work, but it is like shocking how there's like, I don't know what the stat is now, but at the time it was like there was twice as many black market dispensaries as licensed ones and shit in California. I'm sure it's the case. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know what the like.
No, yeah, the unlicensed is still running crazy, and now in New York we're kind of running with the same thing. And I mean, it's 100% true. Like, I don't want to do too much into the spoilers, but yeah, since you mentioned it, the whole part of the story eventually leads to the weed going into the unlicensed markets and things like that. And that's where all New York's weed is coming from now. And it was cool to see you guys actually talking about it, because I don't think I've seen any sort of like production kind of really talk about it just yet. But like, that is where a lot of the unlicensed weed is coming from, is just these companies that are either unable to get it through testing or any other sort of reason, and it's just ending up in different states. So what kind of was that research like? Were you guys connected to the market, or did you have to get linked up with people? How did that all come about, getting that the additional information?
I think that specific came from somebody that I worked with, and coincidentally knew Matt from a completely different project from years prior. I think he just like casually alluded to it, when he was something that came up, I think when I was there, but then when Matt and I were chatting with him, he referenced it, and both of us were just like, oh, we need to look into this. And it just became like the natural research when it was like, oh, there's just fascinating things happening in this world. Let's dig into this.
Yeah, we tried to talk to people kind of in the industry, like the people that Dan had worked with, like my uncle, my wife's uncle, just like tried to sort of get a sense of like what people were. And then we just watched also a ton of YouTube videos about like Hall of Flowers or people speaking at conferences or people, that sort of like to really get a sense of like the weed world. Like it's sort of, it was a lot of that was kind of there. So yeah, a lot of it was word of mouth, and then also sort of seeing the facade. And we wanted to tell that story, like the facade that these companies put up, how they're acting publicly, but what it's really like to have to work for these companies that are all scrambling and just doing the best in like a whole new industry.
That little, that plot point in the first episode about the importance of the booth at Hall of Flowers was based on like that was based on reality, where I saw like, oh, these companies are really putting a lot of pressure on themselves for the booth, and I felt like that really was the what they were focusing on.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because like it sounds ridiculous if you don't know it from that world or even from the branding world, but then I know companies that are like, yeah, we made it or broke it by having like crazy like scenery or models or like you said actual elevators and stuff like that. And that's where I think, Matt, you were saying it, where it really like mirrors the tech world. And I mean, there are a lot of people that came from the tech world that came into it, and I think that like is kind of what I liked about Bloodweed was it did kind of really highlight that there are some concerning individuals that are coming into this. There's some really great folks coming from other spaces, don't get me wrong, but like there a lot, especially when the money was high, when you guys were putting the story out there, there's a lot of people that just came in that are thinking it was a get rich quick scheme, which is like absolutely not the case. It's it's still a really high risk industry.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the other kind of big font of research that we did for the show was like management, was like business man, because like kind of the core joke of the show is like bringing in like Asana and Slack and like all these kind of like tech tools to run like a black market, to run like a drug company, and like a mob, to run like the mob. But so like a big part of that and satirizing that, we also read like a bunch of like new business kind of management books and stuff like that. So my wife she's like an engineering manager at like tech companies. And so I was just kind of like, I just like stole all the books from her library that she had read about how to like optimize your team and how to like do all that doublers and deleters and stuff like that. Was all kind of just ripped off of like those kinds of books. And for us, like that was kind of the core joke, was like mixing that stuff, that like hardcore business lame stuff, with mob and drug industry, and that was a lot of the show.
I'm glad you mentioned it, man, because when I was listening to most of it on a road trip when I was actually going to check out some dispensaries, and I was thinking, actually the scariest thing as a freelancer for the last 7 years was the scariest thing of your show was dealing with all those sort of like management systems and all that sort of stuff. Put in Asana, put in the Trello. Like when you mentioned Trello at the end, I was like, God damn it! They did their research. Like Asana is old now; everyone's on Trello, and it's like, oh my god, yeah, it's crazy. Like there's so many efficiency tools. I remember working in startups prior to going freelance, and it was just like so many efficiency tools that it becomes an inefficiency. Like I was kind of relating to Andre and Sergey, because it was just like, it's a fucking task to put in a task. Why do I have to do this when I could just do the task? It's like, maybe I'm just old. I don't know.
No, man, that's ripped directly from our lives when like our like comedy companies tried to like implement Asana.
It's like, I get it on paper, but it just like, can't we just make a note of it? Or I don't know. There's got to be a more effective way to do this. Yeah, man, I love it. And you're, like you said, that seamless integration into it, it really works out well. And, obviously comedy has its over the top elements when, the name of it is the most over the top element to it, dumping blood on the weed to make it taste good, and where it goes from there. No spoilers on that part. Basically, you guys being heavily influenced from your real life and stuff, was that also somehow an influence, or was that something that you thought of on your own to boost the flavor? Or did that come out of the news that is something I missed?
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm pretty sure the blood on the weed was 100% fictional.
Yeah, that's
I saw Matt's face and I was like, shit, did I miss a news story or something?
No,
okay.
Yeah, no,
good.
Yeah, no,
good.
Yeah, I think that just came from good old-fashioned brainstorming.
Yeah.
Good. And if we're hiding any facts and figures, feel free to tell me off the record, please. Good. That was the one element that we were worried about there. But like I said, some cannabis folks kind of get a little bit sensitive about their media representations, and I think sometimes it's understandable, sometimes not. But I think Bloodweed was really fun. I'm going to be giving it a pretty positive review. No spoiler, I guess. What I'm going to be putting in the article. But there's obviously going to be some folks that are going to be critical of like elements that aren't true or aren't specific, even though it is a comedy. So, what's been the feedback you guys hear? Is it largely positive, or are you getting anything from the hypercritical side of the cannabis world?
Show just came out. We're waiting to hear from anybody who doesn't like it, which would be that'd be great. I will say the thing about the show is that in things that we have heard about the weed world, like we definitely exaggerate a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of shit that's going on in the real industry that's like crazier, I think, than a lot of we portray.
Absolutely.
So I feel like hopefully people will kind of like take it with a grain of salt, like what we're doing, but also say like, I don't know, maybe something like this could, obviously there's exaggerations, but there's areas of this that like could happen, have happened. I don't know, like shit like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and not trying to solicit any negative reviews. I want to say on that, just there's always some folks in the room that's like, that was a hilarious comedy, and it's like they didn't talk about the terp count or they didn't talk about the THC. It's like, okay, fair, valid point, but it is a comedy and it's about dumping blood on weed.
Yeah, you got to keep things moving. I mean, Dan gets like, there was a lot of shit we took out, like in the greenhouse scene where we got like really into stuff like that.
Oh
like,
my god, yeah, that tour got really into depth.
Remember that?
When the grower is giving Andre the walkthrough all the different strains that they're growing, like that. The original draft of that I think was like 3 times as long.
Yeah, it had all the stuff you're talking about, and the truth is, for people who want that stuff, you don't. It just like slows everything down. You just want to get to like the action.
The one thing I think, Matt, I think we've talked about that we wish we'd gotten a chance to do, it just didn't fit plot wise, is Trailblazers. That event seemed.
Andrew, are you familiar with the Trailblazers event?
Oh, I am. I don't want to weigh in just yet. What are your thoughts? Where were you guys going with that?
Well, originally, that was like one of the events, and one of the later episodes was that they went to Trailblazers to kind of like that. Andre changed his name to Andrew actually, and tried to like fit in at like a Trailblazer summit. And like Gary Vaynerchuk was there.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with Trailblazers, it is a very ultra expensive meeting grounds for some of the top cannabis minds and some other folks. So yeah, it's I would have loved to have heard that. I one time was offered an opportunity to link up with them through like a PR person. I don't think directly through them, and they're like, "We're willing to work with you," and blah 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 blah. And like they were saying they were going to give me a discount, and at the end of it, they're like, "It's a $1,600 ticket to do all this copywriting work and blah 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 blah." And I was like, no, I'm good. I don't know. I feel like those meeting events are really cool and stuff, but you really do need to be picky and choosy because now everyone just thinks you can just slap weed onto it and it'll attract some folks, and it can really attract like you guys showed the varying different cannabis communities in there.
Yeah.
And oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I don't know. I did want to also shout out our cast in the show. Like we got really lucky.
I was actually just about to bring that up. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, we were so stoked to get Haley working on it, and Maria, and Hugo, who plays Andre, just like crushed it. Like there's so many, and we also have all these like hilarious comedians, Zach Cherry, Josh Rubin, Alan McLeod, and Aaron Jackson. I don't know, just Natalie Palamides. There's all these amazing performers in it who just like gave so much to it, which is like was so like gratifying and cool to hear. And yeah, it was just like a pleasure to make the show.
Yeah, it was a really great cast, really great ensemble. And how is it kind of easy bringing that world together after being in comedy for so long, or what was it like trying to get that kind of ensemble cast together?
Dan, you want to take that one? I'm going to plug my computer in real quick.
Okay. Sure. We're going to be bringing it home real soon, too, if you want.
One of them, I mean, in general, and, anytime you have a project that, that you've created, one of the fun things is bringing in who are the people that you're going to be excited to work with. I think audio also lends itself to a little bit of an easier ask, too. Where it's like you can come in, it's quick. We're gonna have some fun. We'll record, and most people are game. So, and I think a lot of it ends up being, there's always sometimes hoops to jump through with some casting, but a lot of times it's just like reaching out to, especially, Matt was referencing a lot of folks in the comedy community. It was people that we have always wanted to work with anyway. So you reach out to them, and sometimes you know them, sometimes you don't, and it's pretty. There's a casualness to it that people are game and they're excited too. So it's fun.
Yeah, I think also like people like the premise of the show and they sort of got it. And then also, yeah, we tried as best as we could. We recorded during COVID we had to do it remote, but we tried as much as we could to get the actors together at the same time. Cause we, as sort of directors, we really feel like you can feel that, especially with comedy when they're like kind of riffing with each other or like playing off of each other. So we tried to do that as much as possible to make it like a fun and like good acting experience for everybody.
Awesome. And I think it really created a show that, definitely adds a different depth and level to it than we've really seen from the weed world, and, really kind of showed the cannabis side of the world as you guys were talking about those differences in the evolution. You bringing it home before we got to wrap up on talking about high science here, just one more weed world thought. What is, the stance of pot in the comedy world? Has it evolved from the Cheech and Chong days? Where do you see it? And like, what's its, place in it now? Is it a lot more commonplace, or what can we kind of expect from it, do you think?
I mean, Bloodweed for us, we really felt like this would be such a cool, I don't know, this kind of world is such a cool thing. Obviously we made this show about it. We would love to make more stuff sort of in that world of like treating it seriously, treating it like, I don't know, just portraying the actual industry as it is. Cause there's just like so many stories and so many crazy things in it. But I think so the truth for high science was we tried to make high science 5 years ago, but no network the network that we're working with, Discovery, wouldn't let us do it because they didn't want to show people smoking on television. So for that show, the whole core, that show is using weed as kind of the dumb entry point. We do play kind of dumb stereotypical stoners, but the point of that is because all of our the show is actually super smart. We try to make it, the idea for us to be dumb stoners learning really smart stuff. So, and we tried to make the science and the things you learn in that show, the kind of stuff, I like radio lab level shit, things that you don't really hear about, really trying to do mind blowing stuff. So we wanted to have kind of to make that funny. It was to do kind of that dumb entry point. And for us, the premise of just the dumbest idea that you smoke what you want to learn about and then you hallucinate a whole world about it was the core joke that we wanted to go into it. And yeah, we couldn't make it 5 years ago because it was going to be on ad supported. Cool with it. Now, fast forward to a couple of years ago when they were hey, maybe let's pick this back up again. I think weed is a little bit, it's legal in more places. It's more normalized. They can sell ads against it. I don't know. They just weren't as afraid of it anymore. And so that was kind of cool that we could just make the show that we wanted to make and show us smoking the stuff that we it's not even weed that we're smoking. We're smoking the moon. We smoke the moon, get high on the moon and we go to the moon. We're not smoking.
It's just implied and enjoyed. Yeah. And so High Science, has it dropped already or is it coming out soon?
Yeah, High Science also came out on 420. You can check it out.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's cool. Yeah, but you can check it out on HBO Max. Please do.
I thought it was dropping next month. Sorry. I will definitely check that out now on my list too.
Yeah, sure.
And one last thing is if say someone with a fledgling webcast and kind of a middling cannabis writing career wrote a comedy about a stoner zombie story 7-8 years ago and is trying to sell a script, do you have any tips on how to do that, or is it even worth trying to push up that hill?
Well, if you can't sell it right now, Andrew, we're on strike, dude. That would be scary.
Exactly. Yes, true.
No, WJ is on strike. No selling.
Right. Apologies.
But when the strike is over, I don't know. It's true. Weed is more mainstream, but also a lot of stuff has been covered. I don't know what the script is but I think people are, still cannabis is a big industry and people are trying to do more stuff in it. I don't know. I also, there's always a market for stoner comedies. It's always a fun, also people complain oh, I don't want stoner stuff, but everybody fucking loved Pineapple Express. Everybody fucking loves Cheech. I don't know, you do it right. You treat it, in the right way. And I think people still dig it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. If you folks watching this haven't checked out Bloodweed yet, definitely do. It's a really fun one. Don't take it too seriously, but they do a good job of covering the industry and the serious stuff too. So everyone gets a little bit of what they'll enjoy. So check it out. Check out High Science. Dan, Matt, anything else before we wrap it up? Anything you want the viewers to know about? Where can we follow you, or anything else we should be on the lookout for?
No, I don't know. Bloodweed is on Audible, so you do have to like get an Audible subscription or something to do it. But we
I think they got free trials.
Oh yeah, but you can get a free trial,
Yes.
and you can listen to it during a free trial, and we encourage you to do that.
And please come back in a little while when I'm actually better at helping plug these things and not having you guys do all the heavy lifting on that.
Happy to do it. We really appreciate you getting the word out.
Yeah.
We really love this show and this series, and we want people to hear it. We think it's super cool, and we put a lot of ourselves into it, as we talked about, and so we hope that people check it.
Yeah, you definitely feel it. Really great cast, really great story, a lot of fun. Check out Bloodweed on Audible. Check out High Science on HBO Max. Dan Abramson, Matt Klinman, thank you guys so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.